Alveoli is a word that literally means sac. So an alveolus is just one of these little bubbles right here. But alveoli don't work alone. Alveoli are usually found in clusters like this. So alveolus is singular, alveoli is plural. The thinness of the cells that surround the alveoli or make them up allows for a very short distance of diffusion for oxygen and carbon dioxide, right? You can see in this picture here that there are some holes that seem to be connecting like hallways, the alveoli. These are called alveolar pores, and they equate the pressure in each alveolus so that they all inflate together. Now, if I were to take something of a cross section, I would see that these alveoli are made up of simple squamous epithelium. And we'll add some nuclei here. And this is where the gases are, right in the center of the alveolus. There are elastic fibers that cross over the alveoli and give them the ability to expand, but more importantly, they give them the ability to recoil. So the elastic fibers form like a thin webbing over every alveolus. And also over every alveolus is a capillary bed that you see up here in this top alveolus, right? It's like a webbing also that covers it. And this is the capillary bed that is exchanging our oxygen and carbon dioxide. So this blue vessel here is actually an artery bringing blood to the alveolus. And this other vessel here, the red one, is actually a vessel bringing blood away from the alveolus, right? The artery is carrying blood to, deoxygenated blood to the area, and the vein is carrying oxygenated blood away. Lining each alveolus are cells that are called type 1 pneumocytes, or they can also be called alveolar cells. These are simple squamous epithelial cells through which gas exchange is happening. These type 1 pneumocytes, or alveolar cells, they stack up on each other like pancakes that have been spewed from their stack, and they overlap just ever so slightly at the tips among adjacent cells. I also have a blood vessel here, and this is a blood vessel of the pulmonary circuit. And these red blood cells here, they want to be picking up this oxygen from my alveolus, which is right here. So red blood cells are moving through these capillaries slow enough to allow gas exchange to happen. There are also alveolar macrophages, which were once monocytes that lived in the blood, and they kind of got off in the lungs and took up permanent residence. Their function is to eliminate any particulate matter that has escaped the filtration methods of the nasal cavity, the trachea, the bronchi, and all of those other conducting tubes. So they're looking for stuff that has escaped all of that mucus and all of that cilia. There is one more population of cells in alveoli, and these are what are called type 2 pneumocytes, or great alveolar cells. And these cells secrete surfactant. Surfactant is a substance that, like many laundry detergents, is both polar and nonpolar. And what it means is that surfactant can break up the surface tension of the water on the inside of the alveoli. And I'm just drawing kind of like a goopy lining of surfactant there. So if this alveolus was collapsed, the surfactant that's secreted on all of these cells, it would allow you to then inflate this alveolus again without much resistance. And one of the reasons that is that there are little tiny water molecules that look like Mickey Mouse over here that are attracted to other water molecules on the other side of the alveolus. And we know that water molecules like to cohere to each other and create surface tension. So we see that surfactant is something that can break up that surface tension. We've mentioned this word before, the respiratory membrane, right? This applies to the mucousy carpet that starts at the nasal vestibule, the opening of the nose, and comes all the way down here to one lone alveolus, right? And at the alveoli, there are those type 1 pneumocytes or alveolar cells that are essentially fused to epithelial cells of the blood capillary. And my picture here does not do that justice, but these cells here are essentially fused to these cells here. There is no distance between them. It's the only picture I could get. This right here that I just diagrammed right there. This is what is called the air-blood barrier. We want our air-blood barrier for the respiratory membrane in our alveoli to be as thin as possible, right? And with no mucus. I want my oxygen and carbon dioxide to travel the smallest distance possible. And in order to achieve this thinness, those type 1 pneumocytes or alveolar cells are fused with the endothelial cells of the blood capillary, right? And this thinness creates a really small distance over which gases have to be diffused to be exchanged, right? I want the smallest distance as possible because my gases are going to diffuse. That's a passive process. Pneumonia. Let's draw some pneumonia. Let me get some green here. Pneumonia is characterized by excess mucus production in the alveoli. Basically, your alveoli become filled with mucus, and the lower parts of the respiratory system that are concerned with gas exchange. Remember, there are fewer mucus cells scattered among the epithelium as we move to alveoli. And what this mucus from pneumonia does is it increases the distance that my gases may have to diffuse. Now they have to get through a thick mucus layer. The mucus from pneumonia fills each alveolus. And what it does, not only making the distance longer, it reduces the surface area over which gases just can exchange. Right? Pneumonia also increases the distance over which the gases have to diffuse. And this is why pneumonia is a double punch. But as we saw before, there are bronchopulmonary segments. And those segments hopefully quarantine whatever infection is causing the pneumonia into one pulmonary segment or quarantine it into one lobe of one lung, allowing the other lobes, the other bronchopulmonary segments, to function as normal. And this is a reflection of a concept called ventilation perfusion coupling, that we're going to quarantine a part of the lung and not send it blood to be oxygenated, kind of like shut it down so that it can work on repairing itself. Your lungs are not as big as you think. Your thoracic cavity is not as big as you think. So, how do the lungs of a limited volume oxygenate all of the tissues in your peripheral circuit? Well, lungs have an enormous surface area to volume ratio. I love the textbooks that say that if you were to take the surface area of the lungs and spread it out, it would cover a tennis court. Who did that? I mean, seriously, who did that? Who took somebody's lung surface and spread it out over a tennis court? Never mind, never mind. Diseases like tuberculosis and emphysema, they both reduce the surface area to volume ratio of the lung. They do this by specifically eliminating the surface area of the lung but keeping the same volume of the lung. So by doing so, this reduces the surface area to volume ratio because it's reducing the surface area, the numerator, the number on the top. Tuberculosis causes nodules or granules, big, like huge fist sized connective tissue cell pouches. And these granules build up in your lungs, occupying space that the gas exchanging type 1 pneumocytes or alveolar cells should occupy. So it fills the surface area of the lung. Emphysema is at the other end of the spectrum. And what emphysema does is it destroys the alveolar cells, making your alveoli fuse together. And what this does is it makes one really large alveolus. And that reduces the overall surface area to volume ratio in another way. So both of these diseases reduce this ratio, but one reduces it by adding nodules and the other one reduces it by eliminating alveoli.